Castile, year 1043. A boy is born in Bibar, a town on the outskirts of Burgos. Nobody imagines that this newborn will become the greatest legend of medieval Spain. His name, Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar. History will know him as the Cid Campeador, the warrior who defied kings, conquered impossible cities, and forged his own destiny with sword in hand. But his true history is not that of the perfect hero that the romances sing about. It is much better. It is that of a flesh-and-blood man who navigated between broken loyalties, betrayals, and impossible victories. A warrior who fought for Christians and Muslims alike, who lost everything and regained it, who conquered Valencia against all odds. How a simple son of the lower nobility ended up writing his name in the annals of eternity. Before continuing, if you are passionate about the epic history of Spain and want more content like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. This is just the beginning. The childhood of Rodrigo passes in a fragmented kingdom. Castile and Leon form a unit under King Fernando I. But upon his death in 1065, the monarch commits an error that will mark decades of conflict. He divides his kingdom between his three children. To Sancho he gives Castilla, to Alfonso Leon, to Garcia, Galicia. In addition, he grants the cities of Zamora and Toro to his daughters Urraca and Elvira. It is a perfect recipe for disaster, and the young Rodrigo finds himself in the middle of this storm that is about to break loose. Rodrigo grows up in the court of Sancho II of Castile. He is not a noble of high birth, but his talent with the sword is evident from an early age. He becomes the king's standard bearer, a position of enormous trust that places him in the center of military decisions. The relationship between Rodrigo and his lord goes beyond simple feudal duty. There is genuine loyalty, camaraderie forged on the battlefield, when Sancho decides to reconquer the territories that his father distributed among his brothers. Rodrigo is at his side in every campaign, wielding his sword for the king who trusts him. The war between the brothers is brutal. In 1068, Sancho defeats Alfonso in the Battle of Lantada. Then, in 1072, he beats him again in Golpellera. Alfonso, defeated, flees in search of refuge. And where does he find it? In the Muslim Taifa of Toledo, governed by Al-Ma'mun. This is one of the great ironies of medieval Spain. Christian princes do not hesitate to ally with Muslims when it suits them and vice versa. It is a complex political board where alliances change according to the interests of the moment. Sancho now controls Castilla and Leon, but he lacks Zamora, the city that his sister Urraca defends with ferocity. The siege lasts for months, then the unthinkable happens. On October 7th, 1072, a noble named Belito Dolfos leaves Zamora pretending to be a deserter. He approaches Sancho's camp, and in an act that will change the course of history, he pierces the king with his spear. Sancho dies on the spot. The traitor flees back to Zamora, pursued by Rodrigo, but manages to cross the gates just in time. The death of Sancho leaves Castilla without a king. The throne passes to Alfonso, who returns triumphant from his exile. But there are suspicions. Many Castilian nobles believe that Alfonso was behind the plan that ended the life of his brother. Rodrigo finds himself in an impossible position. He has lost his king, his friend. What should he do now? Rodrigo makes a decision that will mark his whole life. He demands that Alfonso publicly swear his innocence in the murder of Sancho. The scene takes place in the church of Santa Gadea in Burgos. It is a moment of brutal tension. Alfonso, now king of Castilla and Leon, must kneel and swear before God that he had nothing to do with the death of his brother. Rodrigo, simple, noble, without a crown, takes his oath 3 times. He asks. 3 times Alfonso swears. The humiliation of the king is public, undeniable. Rodrigo has demonstrated his integrity, but he has also sown the seeds of his own ruin. Alfonso will never forgive this affront, despite everything. Rodrigo serves Alfonso loyally for years. In 1074, Alfonso marries him to Jimena Diaz, niece of the king. Jimena is not just a noble of high birth, she is a woman of character who will accompany Rodrigo in his worst moments, who will govern Valencia at his side, who will defend his legacy after his death. But the relationship between Rodrigo and Alfonso is poisoned since Santa Gadea. In 1079, Rodrigo leads an expedition to Seville to collect tributes. While he is there, the King of Granada attacks civilian territories. Rodrigo responds with force, defeats the Grenadian, and returns victorious. But his enemies in the court accuse him of having kept part of the booty, of having acted without royal authorization. Alfonso, predisposed to believe the worst of Rodrigo, banishes him without trial. The exile of 1081 marks a turning point. Rodrigo leaves Castile with a handful of faithful followers. He has no armies. He has no land. He has nothing except his sword and his reputation. And what does a warrior without a king do in medieval Spain? He offers his services to the highest bidder. Rodrigo heads to Zaragoza, a Muslim taifa governed by Almtadir and then by his son Al-Mutaman. In Zaragoza, Rodrigo becomes the military arm of the Muslim emir. He protects the city against external enemies, both Christians and Muslims. He defeats Sancho Ramirez of Aragon. He beats Berenguer Ramon II of Barcelona in the Battle of Tebar in 1090, where he captures the Catalan count. The Muslims of Zaragoza begin to call him the Cid, derived from the Arabic Sidi, which means Lord. The Christians call him Campeador, the master of the battlefield. Rodrigo Diaz has become the Cid Campeador, a warrior feared and respected throughout the peninsula. While the Cid builds his legend in the east, the balance of power in Spain changes dramatically. In 1086, the Almoravids, Berber warriors from North Africa, cross the Strait of Gibraltar. Alfonso VI has conquered Toledo in 1085, and the kings of Taifas, terrified, ask for help from the Almoravids. The Almoravids defeat Alfonso in Sagradas, a catastrophic battle. Alfonso, in need of his best warriors, forgives Rodrigo and calls him back. The Cid returns in 1087, but the reconciliation is fragile. Alfonso entrusts him with the defense of the Levante against the Almoravids. However, in 1089, when Valencia needs urgent help, Alfonso's reinforcements never arrive. The intrigues of the court turn against him again. Alfonso banishes him again. This time, Rodrigo knows there is no turning back. He must forge his own destiny. If you are enjoying this epic story, don't forget to give the video a like and share it. Rodrigo looks towards Valencia. The city is rich, strategically located, a jewel of the Mediterranean. In 1092, the Emir Al-Qadir is overthrown by a judge named Ibn Jahaf, who takes control of the city. It is the moment that Rodrigo has been waiting for. He gathers his men, those who have fought by his side for years. The Cid begins to build his own lordship in the Levante. First he conquers Castilian, then Sagunto. He is creating a network of fortresses that surround Valencia. His strategy is patient, meticulous. He waits, cuts supply routes, isolates the city. He lets hunger do its work. In 1093, the Almoravids send a massive army to break the siege. It is the Battle of Quart. The Cid faces forces much superior in number, but Rodrigo has spent decades perfecting the art of war. He knows the terrain. He knows his enemy. The battle is fierce, but when the dust settles, the Almoravids are in retreat. The Cid has achieved the impossible. Finally, in June of 1094, after almost 2 years of siege, Valencia surrenders. The Cid enters the city as a conqueror. It is an extraordinary moment. An exiled noble, without land, without the support of any king, has conquered one of the most important cities of Spain. Rodrigo establishes his court in Valencia. He governs with a firm, but relatively fair hand. He allows the Muslims to keep their mosques, to practice their religion. Valencia under the Cid becomes an independent, prosperous, feared and respected kingdom. Jimena joins him with their children. The family is finally reunited. For the first time in years, Rodrigo has stability, power, a territory that is truly his. But the Almoravids cannot accept that a Christian controls Valencia. In 1097, they launch another massive attack. The Cid, now over 50 years old, rides into combat once more. The Battle of Baron becomes another legendary victory. The Almoravids are crushed. For 5 years, Rodrigo governs Valencia, mints his own coin, maintains diplomatic relations with Christian and Muslim kingdoms. He has become an independent prince, a man who has built his own kingdom with the strength of his sword and the sharpness of his mind. But time takes its toll. On July 10th, 1099, Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar dies in Valencia. The exact cause is not clear in the chronicles. Some speak of illness, others of accumulated wounds. What is clear is that with his death, Valencia loses its protector. Jimena tries to maintain control, but without Rodrigo, the situation is unsustainable. The Almoravids intensify their attacks. In 1102, 3 years after the death of Rodrigo, Valencia is evacuated. Jimena and the Christians abandon the city, taking with them the body of the Cid. They cannot allow the Muslims to desecrate his remains. Valencia returns to Muslim hands, but the legend of El Cid is just beginning to grow. This is where history merges with myth. According to the most famous legend, even after he was dead, the Cid continued winning battles. It is said that Jimena ordered that his body be embalmed and tied to his horse Babieca. Thus, the dead Cid led one last charge against the Moors, terrorizing them as they saw the legendary warrior riding once more. Is it true? Probably not, but people wanted to believe it. They needed to believe that a man like El Cid could transcend even death, and in a certain sense, he did. His legend has remained alive for more than 900 years. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, this is the perfect moment. The body of Rodrigo was buried in the monastery of San Pedro de Cardena, near Burgos. Jimena retired there and lived her last years in prayer. She was buried next to her husband for centuries. The tomb of the Cid was a place of pilgrimage. The sword of the Cid, the legendary Tizona, became a symbol of courage and honor. Nowadays, a sword that is claimed to be Tizona is kept in the Army Museum in Toledo. But beyond the relics and the legends, who was really Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar? The historical figure is complex. Rodrigo was a mercenary, a man who fought for both Christians and Muslims as it suited him. He was not a religious crusader. He fought for honor, for wealth, for power, for his own survival in the Spain of the 11th century. This was perfectly normal. Loyalties were fluid. The Cid was exceptional, not for his faith, but for his tactical brilliance, his personal courage, his capacity to inspire loyalty, and his political ability to navigate the complex board of medieval Spain. When he was banished, when he lost everything, he did not give up. He reinvented himself, built alliances, won battles, conquered a city. He became the de facto king of Valencia. It is a story of resilience that resonates through the centuries. The Spain of the 11th century was a fascinating mosaic of cultures. Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived together, traded, fought, allied. It was a world of porous borders where a Castilian noble could serve a Muslim emir without anyone considering it treason. The Cid lived on the hinge, between two worlds, product of the old Spain of fluid alliances. Approximately 40 years after his death, an anonymous poet composed the Cantar de Mio Cid, the great epic poem of Spanish literature. It is one of the first significant literary texts in Castilian. The poem transforms the life of the Cid into a heroic narrative of exile, redemption, and triumph. These literary elements mixed with the historical facts until it became almost impossible to separate the real from the legendary Cid. Throughout the centuries, each generation of Spaniards has reinterpreted the figure of the Cid according to its own needs. During the Reconquista, he was the Christian warrior. In the Golden Age, the symbol of Castilian honor. In the 19th century, the national hero par excellence. Today, historians try to rescue the historical Rodrigo from under layers of myth. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. So, what should we remember about the Cid Campeador? That he was a real man who was born in Vivar, served kings, fought in real battles, conquered Valencia and died there. That his life perfectly illustrates the complexity of medieval Spain, a place where religious identities were not as rigid as they later became. That he was an exceptional warrior, whose military talent was never equaled by his contemporaries. That his history is fundamentally human, a man who lost everything twice and who rose each time to build something even greater. The sword of Rodrigo was silenced in 1099, but his voice, amplified by the Cantar de Mio Cid and by countless chronicles, poems, plays, and movies, continues to resonate. The Cid has become something more than a man. He is a symbol of human capacity to overcome adversity, to create his own destiny against all odds. In 1921, the remains of the Cid and Jimena were buried with great ceremony in the Cathedral of Burgos, where they rest today under a simple slab that says Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar. Thousands of people visit the tomb every year. They look for inspiration in the story of a man who lived almost 1,000 years ago. The true genius of the Cid was not only his skill with the sword or his tactical brilliance, it was his ability to adapt. When Sancho died, he served Alfonso. When Alfonso banished him, he went to Zaragoza. When he was banished again, he conquered Valencia. Every time the world closed a door on him, Rodrigo found or created another one. That resilience, that refusal to accept defeat, is what really defines his legend. Today, more than 900 years after his death, Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar remains the most famous warrior of medieval Spain. His name is known throughout the world. Charlton Heston played him in a movie of 1961. There are operas about him, novels, comics, video games. The Cid has become a global cultural icon. But behind all the legend, we must remember the man. A man who was born in a small town, who was educated as a warrior, who served his king with loyalty, who was betrayed, who was banished, who fought as a mercenary, who conquered a city, who governed as a prince, who loved his wife, who raised his children, who finally died as all men die. His greatness is not in being perfect or supernatural. It is in being deeply human and still achieving the extraordinary. If you have enjoyed this epic journey, share it with your friends. The cultural impact of the Cid extends far beyond Spain. In France, Pierre Corneille wrote Le Cid in 1637, helping to spread the legend throughout Europe. In Spain, the Cid has been constantly reinterpreted according to the political needs of each era. After the democratic transition, historians have worked to rescue a more nuanced vision of the historical Cid, recognizing his complexity. Today, Burgos celebrates its most famous son. There are statues of the Cid throughout the city. The most impressive monument is located crossing the San Pablo Bridge, where a horse statue of Rodrigo riding Babieca looks towards the city with a determined expression. The Route of the Cid, a tourist itinerary that follows approximately the path that Rodrigo took during his exile from Vivar to Valencia. attracts walkers and cyclists. So, at the end of it all, what does the story of Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar leave us with? It leaves us with the image of a man who refused to be defined by the circumstances of his birth or by the injustices he suffered. A man who turned exile into opportunity, defeat into victory. It leaves us with a reminder that medieval Spain was a much more complex and fascinating place than it is often presented. It leaves us with one of the great epic stories of European history, a narrative of fall and redemption that resonates because it is fundamentally human. Rodrigo made mistakes. He was proud, sometimes ruthless, certainly ambitious, but he was also brave, loyal to those who were loyal to him, brilliant as a strategist and capable of extraordinary achievements. It is precisely this mixture of virtues and defects that makes his story so compelling. The Cid Campeador died more than 900 years ago, but his shadow is long. Each generation finds something new in his story. For some, it is a symbol of personal honor. For others, of resilience in the face of adversity. For others, still, a reminder of an era when the borders between cultures were more permeable. What is indisputable is that Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar lived an extraordinary life, from his humble beginnings in Vivar, through decades of war and politics, until his apotheosis as an independent lord of Valencia. He forged a legacy that has endured through the centuries. His name has become synonymous with bravery, honor, and unwavering determination. And that is his true immortality, not in questionable relics or swords of dubious authenticity, but in history itself, in the words that have been written and will continue to be written about him, in the inspiration that he continues to provide to those who face their own battles. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, the Cid Campeador, rides eternally in our collective imagination, a flesh and blood warrior transformed by time into an immortal legend. And as long as stories of courage and overcoming are told, his name will continue to be remembered. Thus ends the true story of the most feared warrior of medieval Spain, a story that is at the same time deeply Spanish and universally human. If you have enjoyed this epic journey through the life of the Cid, subscribe to the channel, activate the notifications, and share this video. The history of Spain is full of extraordinary characters who deserve to be known. See you in the next documentary.